system. Look, Bretton Woods system is long dead. In 1976, and it was replaced by a Jamaica system, but at the same time Bretton Woods system was largely based on the gold equivalent. In 1976, or around this date, a number of other decisions were being made, and back then the United States decided to step away from the gold equivalent, and this is how Jamaica system was established. And this system decided to detach US dollar from gold equivalent. And what is the foundation for this Jamaica system? This is still in force up until now. This one is based on trust towards US economy. What is happening right now in reality? There is no other promise, no other collateral rather than trust towards US economy. There is nothing else to support that in the world financial system. And right now the United States are exploiting and abusing their dominant position on the world financial market. And this exploitation is generating them a lot of money. According to the data that we have publicly available, the United States own the world economy about 54.3 trillion US dollars. This is the level of their debt. What is this number comprised of? This is 12.6 trillion US dollars. This is what individuals hold on their bank accounts, or literally in their pockets or under mattresses, as we say it in Russia, outside of the borders of the United States. Plus 10 more trillion is borrowed by the US companies. So this is 22.6 trillion of US dollars that are not backed by anything rather than trust towards US economy, belief in the US economy. And the remaining 54.3 is what the residents of other countries decided to invest into US companies. And that kind of investment in the US company is backed by reliability and valuation of those companies. But of course, their security and reliability is strongly dependent on the US economy and US system as well. So what is happening in the world in this regard? The US economy is shrinking in size, and the foundation, the major pillars of the economy are no longer that strong. There are cracks on them. I'm not only talking about the state debt that is massive, but they're not always coping with the goals they set themselves in terms of inflation targeting. They have targets on inflation of 2%, but as we've seen it lately during the pandemic, they go well above 7.8%, which is undermining trust towards US economy. Well, what is backing US economy if it is still shrinking? Well, there is nothing to back it, and this is a problem. Undoubtedly, this is a problem for all holders of US dollars and US money base and assets. So, the fact that the US economy is shrinking, its share in the global economy is being reduced, and it is entirely natural. And this is our shift towards multipolarity in the world economy and world finance. We could definitely come up with alternative systems, but the importance, the role of a given currency is strongly dependent on the economy where it's circulating. So what we do right now is that, together with our BRICS partners, we are designing this work together. And the role of Russia in this regard can be quite meaningful. We have established the New Development Bank. We have established our own currency tools. And a large part of the participants of economic activity are switching over to settlement in national currencies. Take example of China. 90% of our trade is settled in renminbi and Russian rubles. If you look at the territory of post-Soviet countries, the share of Russian ruble is also getting close to 70%. So our role in this regard is quite meaningful, but we have to do it together. That would make it all more substantial. What the US financial authorities are doing right now, we've been discussing it yesterday with some of our colleagues until late yesterday. We've been discussing the composition of our today's session and the potential topics, and we came to conclude that the US authorities, just like what was happening in the UK, they've been intentionally breaking the equipment, the hardware they've been using themselves, that kind of sabotage, and this is what exactly the US authorities are doing themselves. They are destroying and breaking down the mechanism of ensuring their dominance and their supremacy, and US dollar is a mechanism of US supremacy today, and with their own hands they are fostering the road to step away from the use of US dollar. And that would be happening anyway due to the shrinking US economy, but through those actions they are only accelerating this process, and it's only logical that new payment mechanisms are emerging, let's say financial instruments of the central banks that we're talking about within the BRICS format. There are also some other thoughts on that. For example, right now our colleague from Zimbabwe mentioned the importance of attracting investment. Yes, that can be done and should be done, and not just for Zimbabwe, but also for other African countries and countries of South and Southern Asia in particular, and all developing countries. But we need to create the right instruments that would provide guarantees for this investment and their returns. What else can we use other than gold when it can be guaranteed through the quality of the investment projects? If we are to provide for high quality of the investment project, then we have to do that together. Quality and stability of political regimes. Well, that can allow us to establish settlement system that would be entirely protected from volatility and inflation. It can be done, and we've been discussing it with my friend and colleague, President Xi, during my visit to China. We are going to discuss it.
In the 90s, we simply did not spend away. We destroyed all of that capacity. I know that fully well. I remember it because I used to work here in St. Petersburg. 70% of the city's economy was made up by the military and defense industry. Almost all of it was destroyed to the ground. Naturally, from the beginning of 2000s, we had to start working on rebuilding that. A lot was done already on up-to-date industrial basis. But we always believed that we would need to think about the conversion. Not simply about conversion, but we need to think about the development of these productions in a modern way. What do I mean by that? Because around the world, those who produce special equipment and munitions and military equipment, they also produce the civilian-oriented products, and that has tremendous synergy in not only raising investment, but also attracting high technologies. And we're quite successful. We have a plan. It is always in place and always being executed. For example, take last year. Defense industry produced about 25% of civilian production, about 25.1%, or maybe 0.2%. That was in 2022, and last year that civilian production stood at 29-something%, almost 30. Therefore, this process is always taking place. We also must think about our military expenditure and that they are in line with the needs of today and the level of development of our economy, because we cannot parasitize on anything, as it is, for example, being done in the United States. There, balance of payments deficit, trade balance is at about $1 trillion US per year. Try to imagine that. Everyone here in the audience can really understand what that is. This is neo-colonialism in its modern issue. Using the monopoly of dollar, the United States are consuming by $1 trillion per year more than they produce, pumping out the resources from other countries. We were thinking back to the pandemic and the times of the pandemic. What was done back then? I don't remember how much money they printed. I think about $5 and something trillion. And Europe printed about 3.4 trillion euro. What was done next? They distributed this paper around their country. Later, they started to buy up food goods like a vacuum cleaner. They cleaned out the whole world. And for the first time, for many years, they were not exporters, but net importers of food. Right away, the food inflation skyrocketed around the world. But we cannot behave this way. We don't have this monopoly on the world currency as the US does. And we've never behaved ourselves as colonialists or neo-colonialists. Here, we need to use the capacity of the economy and to have a realistic evaluation of it. That is precisely what we do. And we try to balance out the situation in the industry, in the real sector of economy. And for the future, naturally, we're thinking about diversification. That is how we work. Thank you. Wonderful.